Okay, weather is sort of cooperating at this point, enabling me to shoot a video on this silver Cobalt sitting over here. It looks like just kind of a stock old Cobalt, but not quite. This is, believe it or not, a 2005 Chevy Cobalt that makes between 500 and 600 horsepower. This is actually heavily involved with GM racing back in the day. Quasi-factory car, per se. This is called the Phase 5 Cobalt. It was a concept that GM came up with, specifically when the Cobalts were coming out new, which came out in 2005. Sport compact scene was really big back then with drag racing and everything else involved. And GM wanted to be involved. In fact, they were already involved for a few years with the Cavalier and Sunfire. And I think that started around 2002-ish when the Ecotec engine itself came out. And this was just an evolution. But the Phase 5 meant 500 plus horsepower. And this was an attempt by GM to basically come up with a program where you could buy parts to build up your own Cobalt to go drag racing. So I did shoot a video previously on this. It was basically as I got the car, it was still dirty, and I was just kind of checking it out. But now I've done a little bit of research, trying to get a little more information about what this really is, so we can run through about what makes this car make over 500 horsepower, and then ultimately, what are my plans with it, and what are we doing moving forward. So probably first thing to do is we'll do a walk around of the car. Exterior, it's got some hail damage. Interior, engine, things like that. I have some notes. We'll go through the specs, and then we'll talk about what's the plan. Well, might as well start in the front. Visually, on the exterior of the car, probably the single biggest thing you see, other than maybe the wheels and tires, is the different hood. This is a RK Sport, I believe, carbon fiber hood. You could buy them off the shelf back in the day. I'm sure they're no longer made anymore. But other than maybe stickers and things like that, it's one of the biggest things that gives away that this car is not stock. Otherwise, it technically is a base model 2005 Cobalt. Silver, obviously. Automatic 2.2. Many of the stock features, especially externally, are still there. Obviously, the mirrors are still there, etc. Come around the passenger side, you'll see that it looks a little bit different with the Motegi 15 by, I think they're 8 in the front and 15 by 4 in the back wheels with the slicks. Cosmetically, it's pretty clean. It does have some hail damage, unfortunately. It looks like the roof kind of survived, the hood mostly survived unscathed, but the roof and the trunk lid do have some hail damage along with the top edge of the fenders. And there's also, I did clean this up from my first video, just really see what we have here. There's some scuffs and things like that, but in many ways this really is a 20-year-old car with very little miles on it. Otherwise, it originally did have big giant Cobalt stickers on the side, and there was some more stuff on it, so about half the stickers have been removed as it sits here. And honestly, if you took the other stickers off, other than the hood and the obviously different tire setup here, wheel and tire setup, it would almost look stock-ish. Moving around the back, I don't know the video how well it's going to show, but there's hail damage across here, and there's some scuffs over here on the driver's side rear quarter, or in the corner, really. Who knows? It must have rubbed to get something, or I don't know what happened. But otherwise looks, well, actually a little bit here on the passenger side as well. But otherwise, visually looks very stock-ish over here too. And coming back over here on the driver's side, it's much of the same. Pretty clean. The only thing maybe that gives away more on the driver's side is there's a weird looking exhaust down here. And it does have a big dent in it, which probably can be fixed. But otherwise, really stock-ish looking. Heck, it even has I think those are the original mud flaps that came on the car. But yeah, that's just a quick walk around. It's relatively clean. The hail damage is a bit of a bummer, but my other Cobalt sitting over there has hail damage as well. So apparently that's a thing with Cobalts that I have. Next is probably talking about the interior, and this is where it starts to look a little less stock-ish. You can look at the door cards, the door panels. They're all cut out because this does have I believe, a 6-point cage. And obviously it has race seats, Recaro race seats. I think the cage was actually from Roush Industries back in the day. The rear seats have been removed. There's just kind of like a firewall going into the trunk in the back, about of aluminum. Some electronics, if I can get the camera back in here. We'll talk about those more in a bit. And yeah, but it does kind of funny. Aftermarket steering wheel, etc. Going around the driver's side as well. But it actually has, the radio still works. I think the fan blower motor might still work. I'm pretty sure the air conditioning's long gone, if it ever even had it. And I don't think the heater's working as well. But aftermarket shifter, it's a B&M for a racing transmission. Getting into more of those specs in a second. But obviously a race interior, but still kind of stockish things left there. I might as well just walk over to the driver's side as well to show some more of that. And same thing, obviously, door cards cut out for these 6-point cage. Does have autometer gauges. It's actually very dirty in here. I did, believe it or not, vacuum and tried to clean a little bit of the seats. They were really gross. But yeah, so this is the interior. Some stock things remain, but obviously heavily modified for drag racing. So last thing here, I'll probably show the engine, and then yeah, let's talk about what the specs are. And before we get to the engine in the front here, might as well just show off the trunk here. Everything's removed. You can see this is the rear 2-point support bars for the cage in the back. It still utilizes all the stock mounting and everything for the battery. There's some additional wires involved, but really not much happening here in the trunk. But in the front is where obviously the biggest changes are. And coming over here to the very lightweight hood, although it does use hood pins. The original latch is removed, but it does still have a strut on it. And yes, here in the front's where the big changes are. Still a 2.2 liter engine, although heavily modified. Turbocharged, intercooled. It has a GM racing transmission, the 4T65, which is the bigger transmission that came in, would have been all like the mid-size cars. And this one's been heavily modified. But yeah, a lot of a lot of changes here in the front. I think probably most of the stuff here still, I would say, very modern, except probably the electronic fuel injection's kind of dated, but otherwise everything else here is still pretty much current in the racing world. But yeah, let me get my notes here. We can talk about really what all the specs are, because when I shot the previous video, I really didn't know. Okay, got my notes here. Got more info. So literally, I took this off of an article that was written for Super Street Magazine back in 2005 for this specific car. So I have most of the info here on what's in it. And what we're looking at here is the original 2.2 liter Ecotec that probably came in the car. Or if not, it would have been from this era, 2005-ish. The big stuff is 9.2 compression, which probably at least 1 to 2 points lower than would have, probably at least a point lower than would have been stock. GM Performance Parts camshafts, custom intake manifold down here that it's kind of been modified. It's actually under the front support here. Let's see. Cam gear, sleeved block, and balance shaft. Those are all GM Performance Parts improvements. So basically, original engine, the block's been sleeved. It has neutral balance shaft so it can rev higher. It's got heavy-duty Eagle connecting rods, Wiseco pistons, Bates Engineering's valves, valve springs, retainers, and oil pan. The fuel injection, we'll check that out in a second, but that's an old AEM unit, and that's actually one of the issues with it right now. It does not run very good. AEM fuel regulator, spark plug wires. They don't look like AEM, but I don't know. That's what it says it is. Let's see. RC Engineering fuel injectors. Down here. So, okay. What else? Weldon fuel pump. I don't think that's correct. I think it's got Aeromotive in there now. Modified fuel rail, air intake, valve cover. It does have GMLS throttle body down here. What else? Roush Industries custom fabricated exhaust. I can't see it too well, but basically looks like maybe a 3-inch, something like that runs down under the middle of the car and then dumps out here on the driver's side. And unfortunately, yeah, there's a nice dent there. Sorry, I'm checking with someone with the camera here. Okay, yeah, there's a bit of a dent, but I'm sure that could be easily fixed. What else we got? I'm literally just running around the notes. Han Racecraft headers. Well, there's definitely not headers on this thing. That looks like a stockish manifold. Maybe they're talking about this turbo mount with the wastegate and the wastegate pipe, and maybe that's what they're saying. But yeah, there's definitely no header on this car. MSD ignition, Champion spark plugs. Okay, we're getting down to spark plugs. Garrett GT35 turbocharger. Turbonetics Godzilla blow-off valve. Let's see. What else do we have? Innovative wastegate. Boost controller. Spearco intercooler. Down here in the front. Or sorry, no. What am I saying? It's air-to-water intercooler. Thinking about air-to-air. And pipes, whatever that means. But after running through all that, you actually fill up the intercooler with cold water, ice water, whatever down here. It's pumped through this section here. So obviously you have a turbo that makes hot air, comes through, cools off, then runs, and then gets forced into the engine. All this comes down to 535 horsepower at 7,800 RPMs and about 400 pound-feet of torque. I would say with this turbo, I think it said a GT35 or GT45. It's probably in the 60-some millimeter range. Definitely can produce probably in that 500 to 600 range maxed out. I had heard these things were limited to 535. But I don't know. Maybe that's in the electronics. But that's all the big stuff under the hood. What you can't really see underneath is the GM Racing transmission, which is the 4T65. It is beefed up pretty good. I'm not quite sure exactly the specs. I've heard this article that I have the notes from says it can handle 1,200 horsepower, which would be kind of the maxed out version of those transmissions back in the day. I've also heard this might be a lower version, so not quite sure. But it does have some seriously beefy axles, which you can't see from the wheels, but I can just tell you those wheel studs, the lug nuts are huge. I've never seen a version like that before in a Cobalt. It is 5-lug in the rear, and it's the old 4-lug, 5-lug in the front, and it's the old 4-lug in the rear. But it does have Bates Engineering axles, GM Racing limited slip, shift kit, B&M shift lever, cone torque converter, and it says the gearing is 4.28 as final drive. So more specs than you ever want to know, but basically 500 to 600 horsepower Cobalt. And we can't be done without doing one more run through on the interior with all the specs now that I have them here. I didn't really talk about the suspension, but it does have ground control coilovers, camber caster plates up here on the top. What else? KYB adjustable struts. They're probably shot. GM Racing bushings, race prepped A-arms, whatever that means. Grand Am uprights. So this was converted in the front. It's a relatively common thing where they put the Grand Am style brakes and everything in the front because it allows you to, I think, run a different style 15-inch wheel. Let's see. Going through my notes. Talked about the wheels. Motegis. 15x8 in the front, 15x4 in the rear. It does have Mickey Thompson. It says it's a 26-inch tire. Well, that's definitely not right. These are little guys. These are 24.5 by 8 tires. And the back is probably 24 by 4. Yeah, 24 by 4.5. So, and excuse me. Finally, the interior. So we said Recaro race seats, a little weird. These are almost more like a, I guess like a road race seat, and has 2 of them. Not sure why, but anyway. It's got the autometer gauges. Talked about those over there. Sparco quick release steering wheel. It's pretty cool. B&M shifter. It's a ratchet shifter, but I think all the shifting is electronic. Haven't really tried that out yet. What else? It does have interesting, like, those are actually, probably can't tell, but those are Roush racing pedals that the car has. The 6-point cage. So that's all mostly, I think that's all the big stuff on the car. Gone through all the notes. So yeah, basically this is the recipe to, at least back in the day, have a 500 to 600 horsepower drag car. All right, so just ramble through all the stats and everything of what this has, or what this should have, based on the information from way back in the day. I'm sure some minor things might have changed. For sure, the fuel pump's different. But for the most part, those specs pretty much lay out a 2.2 liter turbocharged car with 500 to 600 horsepower. But here's the weird thing. The times that this thing ran were not very impressive. Looking at the information that I could find, and it's a little difficult, this car mostly ran in the 12s, which in a quarter mile, 500 plus horsepower in a car that's probably, I think I read somewhere like 2,700 pounds as it sits there. That doesn't really seem to add up. I think mostly they were probably having traction issues. Also, they may never have run it in the full race tuned up spec. I don't know if they're class limitations or what. But anyway, one interesting thing, and it's over here on the old Regal, is I found an old time slip in this car. Probably the last time this thing's really been raced. And not sure how well it's going to show up on the camera here, but basically it's from San Antonio Raceway in Texas, October 8th, 2000. It, on a Wednesday test and tune, I believe the left side's probably, yes, probably what it did. It ran a 13.4 at 109 miles an hour, which is pretty bad. 60 foot was a 2.38, which is horrible. Otherwise, 6 seconds to 330, 8.9 seconds to 8th mile, 109 miles an hour for the speed. So, I mean, that's not, that is not very good. So seeing specs from the 13 to 12 second range for this car from posted back in the day. And then also, I did see one article where this car, they allowed some journalists to run in it, and I think they ran 12.2, I think they said. So, I don't know. I think maybe I saw somewhere that maybe the best pass it ever did was like 11.9 or something like that. But, I don't know. Doesn't seem to be really adding up. So, I assume probably a lot of it was traction related from back in the day. They've really perfected these a lot more in the last 20 years to get a lot more speed out of them. But anyway, well, the final thing really is to talk about what's the plan for this car. Talk about everything that it is, but more so, what are we going to do? So I bought this car in the last few weeks. Got it locally here in Colorado from the original owners. So it's a bit of a backstory. If I haven't mentioned it previously, sorry to be repeating myself, but the Phase 5 was a car that GM kind of a program that GM put together to try to get a recipe where people could modify their Cobalts and go racing to a variety of stages or whatever they wanted. So phase 5 was 500-ish plus horsepower. From what I can tell, they only really made 2 of these. There was, and these were actually sponsored by GM in support with a local race shop. This one was in Texas. It was more kind of like the middle of the country East Coast car, and they had a different car that was out west. Brittany Kendall, I believe the name. She raced this in at least a couple years. She raced it in 05 and possibly in 06. I don't know if it ever went beyond that. Time slip, I think, was 07, so probably the last time it ever really raced. But there was another car that raced same period, and then obviously GM had the bankruptcy in 08, 09. That kind of killed all their pro racing stuff. So this program just died, basically, along with all the other Ecotech racing things by then. The other car that ran out west was converted up to like a 900 horsepower version. There's actually an old video on YouTube when that one was for sale. Weirdly enough, it's the same setup, but obviously it had things improved to add another 300 plus horsepower. I think they said the best time was like 999, basically 10 flat, which also seems way too slow for that much power. So I don't know, but this car in particular was purchased from someone local here in Colorado who knew the original owners from Texas. A guy local bought it here. He didn't do much with it. I think the hail damage probably came from when he had it. Most of the time it just sat in a trailer. And when I got it, it was super dirty and not been driven in years. I think he took it to the track in 01 or 02 here, Bandimere locally. He said he ran 1150, but I don't think, he might have been off. I think he probably ran somewhere in the 12s, or who knows, maybe in 13s with elevation. But he did make a couple passes with it in 22, 21, somewhere around there. And that time slip says 2000 and, what was that? 8, 7, whatever it was. So otherwise, this thing has been sitting for years. And unfortunately, I'm not going to fire it up right now. It does run. But when I picked it up, when I looked at it, it was in a trailer. We fired it up, got it off the trailer. We drove it onto my trailer, drove it home here. I rolled it off the trailer, and it's been sitting for a few days. And then I did try to fire it up, I guess it was yesterday amongst the rain. And it fired up okay, but it's got a big fuel leak in the front. And it was puking fuel over the driveway. In fact, it's drying up a bit now. You can probably see the, sort of, the stain mark of where it was puking the fuel. So anyway, we're not going to attempt to fire it up now until we give this thing a good once over. Mostly probably fuel lines, different hoses, things like that, just from 20 years of not being used much, really need to be checked. I did put a few gallons of 100 unleaded, I think, race gas, just to move it around. I don't even really know. It might need better gas than that, so have to do more research. But anyway, my plans, not quite sure. Because of the unfortunate hail damage and things like that, I'm not so inclined to run it too much as is or long term. I think the real reason I bought it was the transmission and just parts. They could potentially go into my Pro Front car. But it theoretically is a running car, so might as well try to get a tune in it, see if we can get it running good, because right now it needs help. Maybe race a little bit, and then maybe, I don't know, part it out, or who knows? I don't know. But it's another car. It's another Cobalt. Just what I need, right? But anyway, that's more than enough at this point talking about the Phase 5 Chevy Cobalt. Definitely more to come, though, because we're going to do some stuff with this car. So, but at this point, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.